Jonathan Merel, welcome to Seeing Other People.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Alana.
Excited to have you, as you are somebody who sees a very different side of love than I do. You are a family and divorce lawyer. You are the founder of Merrill Family Law. You see relationships coming to an end. You work with couples who have tried and tried and tried to fix whatever crack in their system, and they have decided it's not working. There's so much that I am excited to ask you about. There's so much I want to know about, the couples you see, what your thoughts are on love and marriage after working in divorce. But before we get into all that, why did you choose this specific path? Like, what made you want to work with people getting divorced?
After practicing for over 20 years, I'm still trying to figure that out. I actually fell into it. I mean, I went to law school. I didn't know what type of law I wanted to practice. My uncle and father were lawyers, but they didn't do divorce. I really didn't want to do anything like too corporate or tax or anything kind of not very stimulating, as I like to say. I needed like human interaction. I needed like something to like keep me going instead of just kind of drafting the same documents over and over and like transactional stuff. I needed like the human interaction. So when I started in law school, I took my first job as a law clerk, which happened to be at a family law firm. I'm like, you know what? I'll give this a shot. And immediately, like, you're immersed into like crazy shit, just not like the dull and boring type of law where just picture going in a suit and talking about taxes and businesses. I mean, the irony in all of that is that divorce law encompasses all areas of the law when you deal with divorce. But I immediately was like intrigued by the drama and like the human emotion and just like helping people through problems. And obviously being an advocate for your client, being an advocate for children who are in horrible situations, being an advocate for domestic violence victims, like really doing good. And even though we don't always represent like the good person in it, you can help bad people who are stuck in bad situations, get into a situation where they want to be, like fighting addiction, fighting emotional problems. So that all clicked with me, and I immediately fell in love with it. Practiced at another firm for like 7 years once I passed the bar, and then started my firm like 16 years ago. So it's been a long road.
Has your view on marriage changed because of the work that you do?
I mean, it's interesting. You definitely see the dark side of marriage, and you also see why marriage is a good thing and why sometimes it can't be a good thing. I mean, I feel like in society, it's so instilled in our heads that, we got to go to college, we got to meet our spouse, you got to have kids, you got to have the white picket fence and, live happily ever after. It's not really like that. And especially like in the modern world, I think that idea of of a traditional family has now become more of a modern family. I don't think the stigma of divorce is as strong as it was decades ago. So while I think, marriage is important, obviously, for stability, for children, if it works, it's great. But a lot of times it doesn't. And I think people can somehow just get so stuck in this mold that they have to stay together because this is what society tells them to do. That leads to problems. It leads to people being unhappy. It leads to infidelity, a million things, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I think that stigma of divorce has lessened, and it's allowed people to do what they want with their lives and not necessarily live miserably.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, as I've gotten, more into my 30s, and I have friends who are, closer to their later 30s who are still single, they are now encountering more people who are divorced out in the dating world. And same thing with, people who have been engaged, but then either them or their partner called off the engagement. And I feel like a younger version of me would have not, I think I would have like taken that differently, where now I'm like, okay, this person, like, that just shows that this person committed and like wanted to make something work, and they tried and it didn't work. And they did the hard thing, which is going through a divorce and creating a new path for them in the future. Like, I actually think if somebody, is in their 30s and has gotten divorced, like, okay, they tried and
Yeah,
they
of
wanted it
course.
to work and it didn't, and good for them for not staying in something that wasn't working.
Agreed. And there's tons of people. I mean, I see it in friends, clients, people I deal with. I mean, there are tons of people who are miserable in their marriage and they
Yeah.
don't do anything about it. And, they say, oh, well, we're doing it. I'm staying in it for the kids, or we'll see what happens when the kids go to college. But they're not helping anybody. I mean, if they
Yeah.
think they're helping their kids, they're not, because kids are very smart. They can see when their parents aren't happy. They can see when there's no hugging and kissing and affection being shown by their parents, or fighting. Um, so, I know people think they're doing the right thing by staying together, but they're
Yeah.
not helping themselves and they're not helping their kids. So I think, again, there used to be this stigma where you had to stay married and divorce was this horrible thing. And I think societal norms have changed a lot about that.
Have divorce rates increased because of that? Or do you think because there's this like overload of information, like we have so much information about quote unquote healthy relationships, about, what type of person we should look for. We've all like done self-help A through Z. Like, is that leading to fewer people getting divorced or more people getting divorced?
What first, I think fewer people are getting married. So
Mm,
I think it's okay now to, like, you're in relationships with someone, maybe you guys have, maybe there's a kid, and you guys, people can live as, like I said, the modern family. They don't have to be husband and wife. So I think the lower marriage rate equates to the divorce rate kind of staying steady or maybe even reducing a little, because people don't feel like they have to get married, or when they do get married, they're waiting instead of, 24, 25, they're waiting till their 30s, as you
right.
know, and they're making smarter decisions. Because, look, at the end of the day, do you really know if your marriage is going to last forever when you get married? No, nobody knows
No.
that. You would like to think that, of course. Um, but I think people are smarter and more intelligent and know more about what they want when they wait. I mean, if you think about it, you go to college, you're in grad school, or you're living in New York or Chicago, and you're, got a job, and, you're trying to meet someone. You don't necessarily know what your partner is going to be or who your perfect match is. I mean, you might
Right.
get into a serious relationship and you're like, all right, well, we've been dating, and then our friends are starting to get engaged. I guess I got to get engaged. I think that happens a lot, instead of really thinking it through and be like, is this the person I want to spend the rest of my life with? So I think people
Uh,
are getting
yeah.
smarter. They're not as rushed. There's not as much pressure, and they're making better decisions.
Absolutely. I have a friend who she is getting married next year, but she and her now fiance, they were together for like 5 or 6 years. And, we were getting lunch one day and I was like, are you guys like going to get engaged soon? Like, what's your timeline? And she's like, we know we're going to end up together. Like, that is our plan.
Right.
We feel like we are in no rush to get married and to get engaged because we have weddings every other week. We're seeing
Right.
all of our friends go through the craziest wedding planning process. And we know that all that's going to happen when we get engaged is that we're going to have to plan a wedding. And we just like don't want to do that right now. So we're waiting. Like, we're together now. We'll be together then. And I had so much respect for that. I think it bothers me, like, not actually, but a little bit when it, like, whenever people get engaged and they like make their engagement post, it's like I can't wait to spend forever with you, as if like once you get married then your forever starts. Like,
Right.
well,
Then
you're
you're supposed
already
to feel that way.
spending, right, like you're already together. Like, you're already like there. You're not like waiting for day one of marriage
Right.
to be together. So I have a lot of respect for couples that are like, yeah, like we don't need to rush, or, we're okay doing things differently. We're okay, you
Yeah.
know not.
The marriage itself
Yeah,
should not change anything. I mean, it's
it
just a
doesn't.
step in the
Yeah.
relationship. Having kids, that's a different story, because the whole dynamic of the relationship changes. But I mean, a marriage should be the same relationship as a boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, like, "What's been different since you've been married?" I'm like, "Literally nothing. It's exactly the same, except I'm not planning a wedding, so I'm a happier person."
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
that's it.
Exactly.
And I remember asking friends who were like steps ahead of me, like, "What changes like when you get married?" And they're like, getting married wasn't the transition, like moving in together was.
Right. That's a change. And a lot of
Mhm.
people obviously live together before they get married. Some don't. But
Yeah,
yeah, living together is obviously a huge step. I think that, you obviously get to know each other more. And I mean, you got to know if you're compatible living together. I mean, it's easy to be
totally.
compatible when, we go out for dinner or we stay at your place or my place sometimes, or, we each have our nights alone. I mean, when you're living with someone, like it's on, like there's
It's in.
no
Yeah,
escaping, like you guys are living together and spending every second together.
100%. What have you found to be the most common reason or reasons that people choose to file for divorce?
I think the obvious number one is infidelity. But the way I
Mhm.
like to look at, I mean, that's one of many reasons, which I'll get to. But I've always thought there are two types of infidelity. There's like the bad actor who's just a cheating asshole who just wants to like have his cake or her cake and eat it too. And they're just a cheater. But then there are the people that I can understand it more. Like if you're in a relationship that's lost all intimacy, all affection, all emotion, all ties, and you're still in this marriage,
Yeah.
I think it's also common for people to kind of look elsewhere for affection. I mean, I've always said, if there's nothing left in your marriage, get divorced before you're the one gets caught cheating, because
Yeah.
you could end it on terms that are the right way, or you're always going to be known as the person who ended the marriage because they caught cheating. So people stray, I think, when they're in a horrible relationship, but they shouldn't let it get to that point. They should either
Mhm.
fix the marriage or get divorced. And oftentimes people, again, just kind of hold on too long and end up, caring less about the sanctity of their marriage and wandering and oftentimes getting caught. So that's definitely a big reason why people get divorced. Obviously, cheating. Um, but there's other reasons. Obviously, money is a huge factor. Um, and it's not just not having enough money. It's like the saying, more money, more problems. So it's people who, perhaps came from more like didn't have a lot of money before or growing up, and they come into money or they start being very successful, or you know things can cause like a change in how people act when they get money, or people's personalities can change. So I mean, that's the instance where, more money creates more problems. And I mean, I think we all know where that goes. But then obviously when people lose their money and they lose that
Mhm.
lifestyle and they're still trying to keep up with the Joneses and make sure, they have all the things that everybody has, or the fancy cars or the nice house or the nice, designer clothing. If your ability to do that, um, is gone, then people who have been accustomed to a certain lifestyle don't have that anymore. That could obviously cause chinks in the armor when it comes to like the stability of the marriage. And then there's people that just grow apart. I
Yeah.
mean, there doesn't always have to be like a major reason. I mean, people change. Like the person you married when you were in your 20s and then now you're in your 50s is might not be the same person, and you might not be the same person.
Totally.
Priorities change, interests change. And obviously, a big part is like when you have kids, obviously the focus is always on the kids. The kids are everything, even though people put their marriage on the back shelf, which isn't great, but I get it because, kids, 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 we got to do this, we got to go there, we got to take them here. Like when the kids are out of the house and it's just the two of you, and it's just the two of you who have to see each other, there's no
Right.
distractions about getting someone to a practice or this or that. It's just the two of you front and center. And that's tough to realize after many years of having the distraction of kids. That's just two people back together like the marriage started, and it's a
Mhm.
different situation. So, all those things I think lead to the idea of divorce and people considering it and obviously moving forward with it.
How often do you find that couples come in and it's like a mutual decision, it's amicable, they're like, we love each other, but we're not in love anymore,
Mhm.
and it's a very friendly process versus there's drama, it's very contentious, people are attacking the other, like it's,
Yeah.
very in the weeds.
I mean, we handle a lot of contentious cases, but we do everything we can to diffuse them from the beginning. I mean, as a good attorney, you owe it to your clients to really try to get it done the right way, whether it be through mediation. But, you have to let cooler heads prevail. I mean, again, a lot depends on the circumstances. If someone was just betrayed and there was an affair, like it's hard to get those people to calm down. Obviously, you got extreme cases where there's abuse or someone's a drug addict or an alcoholic. Those are harder to diffuse. It really depends on the people. Like if two people can just understand that for the sake of themselves and their kids, that it's better to do it the right way, it'll be less stress, it'll be less time, it'll be a hell of a lot less money,
Mhm.
then those people get it. It's hard. You have people who are on that track, and then a big thing that blows things up is when someone starts dating someone else, while you're separated. That causes, many bumps in the road, but you really just need the people to be in the right mindset. Some cases are just destined to be a disaster, and you're just trying to kind of do damage control. But
Mhm.
you hope you can get people in the right mindset, and lawyers are a big part of that. Like there are lawyers out there who just want to turn every case into a mess, and they're just going to try to antagonize and give,
Yeah.
unrealistic advice. And you have to give everyone the right mindset from the beginning, and a lot of that falls on the lawyers.
Yeah. And I imagine people are going into it choosing the type of lawyer they want. Like if they're angry at their
Yes.
spouse, their spouse wronged them in some way in their eyes, like they
Yes.
want to attack that person.
Yeah, I mean, look, the best type of lawyers are the ones that encourage like peaceful resolution. But if the gloves are off, we could be the biggest asshole bulldogs out there. I mean, those
Right.
that's a good lawyer. I mean, no one wants to have to litigate, but many cases there's no other option.
It's part of the job.
Yeah.
Do you ever see couples come in or someone, wants to file for divorce and then somewhere along the way in the process they change their mind?
Yes. It happens, I would say, here like once a month,
Wow.
maybe. I mean, we have a lot of clients, but it happens. um, Not to be the glass half empty guy, but 9 times out of 10, if someone dismisses the case, they'll be back eventually,
Mm,
which is, it sounds morbid and, not very fairy tale esque. But I think like when you reach a point and you're filing for divorce, like the marriage has suffered a lot. And we're,
right.
way I look at it, when someone's finally coming to me, like they've had a long road to get to me. They've
Yeah.
tried counseling, they've tried everything under the sun, and they've just run out of options and are now talking to an attorney and want to file for divorce. So it's not like, they just woke up one day, all right, I'm just going to talk to a lawyer, I'm getting divorced. And there's always been a long road to get there. So it's why I think even if like, people have this, temporary enlightenment that like, oh my God, we should totally be together, everything's going to be fine. Again, not to be like the negative guy, but it's hard for people to change,
Yeah.
and to change someone to get them to the person you want them to be after all of this. And there's probably been trauma, there's probably been tons of bumps in the road. It's really tough. Look, more power to them if they can make it work after dismissing their divorce. God bless them. I would love
Mhm.
nothing more. But the facts are the facts. More people than not end up coming back and just say, we tried and it just didn't work out.
Yeah. I want to talk about before getting married.
Okay.
A lot of the listeners are either single or, in
Yeah.
relationships, not yet married. What I want to talk about prenups, but with that, I want to talk about like what do you think are the most important conversations couples should be having before they decide to get married?
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah, there's definitely conversations people should have. I think you really have to know the person. You have to know them on their good days. You have to know them on their bad days. Obviously, number one, like you have to know like if they want children. I mean, if there's any sort of gray area or ambiguity as to whether or not someone wants to start a family, and um, that's tough. And people can obviously have trouble getting pregnant, and there's that whole thing. But you obviously want to know if people want the same things as you. And I think you have to just know the person, not just regarding children, political views, things that could cause, arguments in the future, just how people are and what the lifestyle that they want, talking about like down the road, retirement, where do you want to live? Do you want to live in the city? Do you want to live in the suburbs? Like these are conversations that if not discussed beforehand, can lead to huge arguments. So I think it's just a general idea that obviously you love the person, you have a connection with them, but you also have to get into those details, whether you like it or not. I mean, not everything can be decided obviously right away, but if you have major differing opinions right from the get-go on major issues like that, that's a big red flag that could cause problems later.
Yeah, and even before you talked about money, I think that's
Oh,
huge.
of
Like
course.
whether you have a certain amount now, you might have a different amount later. Like I think just how people spend money can be
Oh,
so
huge.
complicated, and people can be so on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of like how they view money, their relationship with money, and
Yeah.
what they want for their future in
Lifestyle. I mean,
yeah.
lifestyle is a huge part of it. There
Yeah.
are people who have tons of money and you'd never even know it. There are people who have little money and you'd think they have gazillions of
Yeah.
dollars. And then you have people who just want to live a certain lifestyle. I think it's important, like you said, communicate with your partner about what lifestyle you expect, you enjoy, that you want to keep things, somewhat reasonable when it comes to spending. You don't want to go beyond your means. No one wants to go into debt. Again, these are all things that you should talk about. You should have obviously a sense of it from the get-go as you start dating someone, but definitely conversations you want to have.
Yeah, if you don't, I mean, it's going to be too late. When you're having them, it's going to be to try and solve a problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, marriage itself,
Mm-hmm.
people don't like to admit it, but marriage is a contract. Like marriage is a business decision.
It is.
It's like a joint venture.
Partnership for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Prenups. People are afraid to have them. They think, well, what does this say about me if I'm already, planning for divorce while I'm planning my wedding and I'm about to walk down the aisle, but we're signing this contract of if
Right.
it doesn't work out. As an expert in the field of marriage and divorce, should people be getting prenups?
Yes. The general answer is yes. I mean, if two people really don't have anything coming into the marriage, there's less of a need. But I mean, obviously, they're very prevalent in second marriages because people are usually later in age and have built up wealth. If there's any reason you think you want to protect something that you're coming into the marriage with, you should have one. Um, the main reason people go into get a prenup, is because they want to protect assets that they're coming into the marriage with. So that's the main reason. You could also kind of project what you want to do later on. The problem that prenups can cause, and I'm a huge proponent of prenups, don't get me wrong, is that people essentially enter into prenups with an idea of what's going to happen in the future. We're
Mhm.
going to have kids. We're going to have a lot of money. Everyone's going to be healthy, and this is what's going to happen. So the terms of the prenup are based on these preconceived ideas, which in a perfect world probably would happen. Unfortunately, we're not in a perfect world. So they make decisions about support and children, which, they're not necessarily too geared to children, but obviously protecting assets as if this person is going to be the breadwinner and this person's going to be the stay-at-home parent. It doesn't always work that way. So, I mean, you could really get into trouble and back yourself into a corner if you get a prenup which terms are just based on what your expectations will happen. But generally speaking, obviously, prenups are great because it can avoid the fight in a divorce. It could outline things now before you're married so you don't have to deal with them then. So if you're coming into the divorce with assets of any kind, a prenup can allow you to list them, and both of you will understand that these assets were each of ours before the marriage. In the event of a divorce, they're going to remain each of ours. And we don't have to go through the whole rigmarole about what did you have, what did I have. It's all listed clearly. And it could create a much easier divorce in the end. Obviously, I think the biggest problem with prenups is that people don't want to talk about them. They don't want to have the conversation. They're leading up to like the happiest day of their life. The last thing they want to do is start talking about what happens if we get divorced. So that's a tough nut to crack, but I think it needs to be more like of an early discussion. Like once a marriage is decided, I think it's just say, hey, let's not make this weird. Let's get a basic prenup. And obviously, there's different scenarios. If someone comes from a lot of money or has a lot of wealth or is due to inherit stuff, they have much more incentive to get a prenup, in which case it's usually the parents telling the son or daughter, you better get a prenup. I mean, the way I say it, just tell them like your lawyer's telling you to do this and it's something that you want to do. It can get ugly. I mean, I've had marriages called off because the prenup wasn't signed. I mean, that's an
Wow.
extreme case, but it happens. I mean, again, it depends on the financial situation and what's trying to be accomplished. Again, second marriages, it's much more prevalent because no one wants to like give up everything that they just lost in their prior divorce. And that's a much more of a like regular scenario for a prenup, but I don't think it's as like I said, as taboo as it used to be to get a prenup. It doesn't have to be a whole like crazy document, and the provisions can apply equally to both people. So you
Right.
could say, look, I think a prenup is something we should do just in case, and it's every provision is going to apply the same to me as it will to you.
Yeah, I remember a friend explaining it. Her parents had gotten divorced recently, and she was about to get married, and she was saying like, "Yeah, you do this when you still love each other,"
Yes,
which I think
that's a
is,
great way to put it.
yeah,
And you
yeah,
do it as soon before as far away from the marriage date as possible. The last thing
yes,
you want is to be negotiating a prenup like as guests are starting to fly in town for your wedding.
yeah,
Like that is not good. So like I always encourage people, I don't care if it's like a year in advance, 6 months in advance, it'll be much better. Get it signed, sealed, done, and you don't have to think about it again.
right. You put it away, and
Yeah,
it
hopefully
doesn't. You don't
never
even.
have to look
Yeah,
at it. Exactly.
exactly. For someone who's in a situation where they have never really dealt with lawyers before, they never thought they'd be getting a prenup, but suddenly, like, their partner or their partner's family is like, you must do this. And they're like really freaked out by it. What would you want them to know and understand about it?
Well, I mean, look, oftentimes, especially with younger people who haven't necessarily accumulated a ton of wealth, the pressure for a prenup is going to come from the parents. And, I think that's an easier way to stomach it instead of just, having no other reason. And you're just saying to your spouse, like, hey, this may not work out. Like, we need this. I mean, the coming from parents, I think most people who are getting married understand. If
Mhm.
it's one person who has the wealth in their family, they understand because it's their parents. And I think if it's the other, they have to understand too. If it's both parties coming from, a position of wealth, then it's even easier. It's just like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Again,
Right.
this doesn't mean you love the person less. It doesn't mean that things are doomed. Like this is just a part of the process and you're protecting yourself. And I think it's more easily understandable when there's, significant wealth on one of the sides.
Yeah, completely agree. Okay. Let's say somebody does decide they want to get a divorce. They've never done this before. Can you break down what the process is actually like from like first call to like,
Sure.
okay, you're divorced?
Sure. Well, divorces can go a number of different ways and they can take very short time. I've had divorces be done in 2 weeks, and I have cases that have lasted over 7 years.
Wow.
Obviously, both extremes. But the number one thing that will prolong a divorce typically are child related issues. Like if there's a big fight over kids and you have to get experts and custody evaluations, and obviously, that's not something you could settle with dollars and cents and just saying, I'll give you more money. Like these are people's obviously raw emotions and feelings when it comes to their children, which is always the top priority. Those things can make things delay because they're harder to settle. It's harder for no one's going to just kind of give in on the time they're spending with their kids in exchange for some money, although sometimes people will do that, which is sickening. But
Yeah.
divorces can be really short. I mean, at the outset of a case, obviously, you're each hiring your attorneys. How you got to your lawyers or the circumstances for the divorce obviously vary from couple to couple. But at the outset, it's really just the exchange of information. It's called the discovery phase. You're exchanging bank statements, tax returns, pay stubs, credit card statements, really any financial document under the sun, so the lawyers can really ascertain what these people have. What's their income, what are their assets, what are their liabilities, what are their expenses, most states will require people to kind of fill out what's called the financial affidavit, which details all of your expenses. And this is an important part of it. If you have a spouse who hasn't worked for a long time, you're trying to establish what the lifestyle is, how much money you would need in support. So these are really crucial things, which can also involve experts.
Mhm.
Once that gets done, the attorneys have an idea of kind of what there is. And again, I'm speaking, there are people who have very simple finances, and there are, people who have super complicated finances. Obviously, complicated divorces, high net worth individuals, which we deal with a lot, are business owners. So you have experts to value the business, value what, determine what a spouse's income is. You have other assets like investments that aren't easily discernible as to the value of them. So, I mean, it can get super complicated, involve not just lawyers, but lots of experts that are chiming in on values and stuff like this. And, it can get ugly when you're taking depositions of business partners and, paramours, and lots of things can go on. But in the end, you're really just trying to find common ground. Good lawyers will obviously try to sort through the bullshit and try to narrow the issues. If you end up needing the help of the court, that can obviously prolong things even more because you're kind of at the mercy of the court schedule. You can spend days and weeks in court, not even on the trial of the whole matter, but just, deciding support issues and discovery issues, a million things. So obviously, if you can resolve it out of court, chances are it's going to get done quicker,
Mhm.
cheaper, and easier. But it's not always possible. At the end of the day, you want to find common ground. You can't decide, a lot of people just get so emotional that they're willing to spend $10,000 on legal fees to fight over a couch that's worth $2,000. They don't care.
Right.
So the logic and rationale gets thrown out the window. And it's my job as their attorneys to kind of reel them in. Some people you can, some people you can't. And you also can't control the other side. If the other side's crazy and has no interest in settling, cases can go on and on. But at the end of the day, you're trying to get cooler heads to prevail, focus on resolution, focus on people thinking about their kids and reducing the animosity, and getting to a
Yeah.
place where you can move on to the next chapter and they're both happy with the terms. Easier said than
Yeah.
done, but eventually you usually get there.
What would your advice be for a person or a couple that are struggling with, like, should we stay or should we go?
It's a great question, but it's a tough one to answer. And that answer is different for everybody. I mean, there are people, and I know tons of people who are content just living a miserable life. They just don't, they want the lifestyle, they want the house, they want, what everyone in society thinks should be the perfect family. And even if they're not happy, they're willing to sacrifice that and just stay. There are other people who are just like, I don't want to live like this anymore. Like, I have the rest of my life ahead of me. It's not that you necessarily don't love the person anymore, but you just know you're not compatible. And you know that, like, come retirement age and you're sitting on a beach staring out into the ocean watching the sunset, that's not the person you envision next to you. But it's a
Yeah.
hard decision. I mean, obviously, I would encourage any couple that's going through trouble to try to fix it, because it's fixable sometimes. But if it's like a fundamental difference of like personalities and someone's changed, and maybe you were 25 and love going out and partying and going to clubs and everything, and now you're in your 40s and someone doesn't like going out, or someone doesn't like drinking, and like you're kind of losing your mutual interests, then it's tough. But I think, look, like, couples therapists can help. They can
Mhm.
fix things. I think the biggest problem that causes marriage to break down is communication. People just stop communicating. They let things that are bothering them fester, and they can't talk about it with their spouse, and it just becomes boiled up into this huge mess. And no one wants to talk to each other. Everyone's being short with each other, yelling at each other, and it just creates a huge problem. So I think if the first sense that you have a problem, you have to address it head on, either by communicating with your spouse directly or realizing that you should talk to somebody.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think we've come a long way with, couples therapy being less stigmatized, which is amazing. But
For
I
sure.
think people are still afraid of, like, oh, well, if we're going to couples therapy, does that mean our
Right.
relationship is in trouble? Like, but
That's a
it can
great
be an
point.
amazing thing. And every time I've talked to a couples therapist, they're like, yeah, like, come to couples therapy before there are problems. Like,
Right.
learn how to, communicate with each other when things are good. That will help you communicate when something starts to go south. And I think
For
that
sure.
that's so smart. And, there's no shame in having someone help facilitate important conversations. Like, what's so bad about that?
No, I mean, again, the stigma is less, and you should not think twice. If you're having problems in your marriage, or even if like see some cracks in the road, like
Yeah.
get there and talk to somebody.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that you've learned about, people or relationships through your work that has surprised you?
What really surprises me is how long people can just stay living in misery. Like I guess
Mm.
I didn't really know that before, but like you think like there are people, I mean, these are extreme cases, but I mean I just talked to someone a couple weeks ago. Like she's literally been abused. And I know abuse is like a different ball game. Like you can kind of get obviously messed up mentally and they make you think that you're the problem and this is all somehow your fault. But I mean, even just hearing like these horrible stories of abuse and how long people tolerate it, whether they think it's for their kids, despite like their family and friends literally begging them to get out of the situation, and I mean, obviously that's an extreme, but again, just people living in miserable situations. They haven't had sex in 15 years. They haven't, hugged their partner in 15 years. They haven't kissed their partner. I mean, literally, like their children have not seen them function on any level of love.
Yeah.
And they just think it's okay. I mean, eventually, maybe there's a breaking point, but there are people who will spend their lives living like this. And again, obviously, abuse can mess with people emotionally and mentally. But I mean, my whole point would be is you have one life to live. You have your whole life ahead of you. If you're not happy, like divorce can open the door to you being happy and moving on. It does not mean like the end of the road for you. So I wish people would understand that. Again, by no means am I encouraging divorce, but what if people are not happy and they're
Right.
looking, wake up every morning and think like, what am I doing here? Like you should do something about it, or at least learn more about what can be done. So that really
Totally.
surprised me. I just figured when I started out, like, oh, divorced people are just people that like have to get divorced. And I mean, you learn as your career goes on, you learn many people are just willing to stay in a miserable relationship.
Yeah. With, you mentioned like children of divorce.
Mhm.
Is there any correlation between a child of divorce getting divorced later on?
There are like statistics. I don't like maybe they are more prone or maybe I haven't checked on the statistics lately, but obviously I think kids of divorce have amazing perspective on marriage and
Mhm.
what they want as compared to children whose parents are married. I think when you are a child of divorce and you see like the breakdown of your parents' relationship and what happens after that, I think you have more perspective and hopefully would make better decisions when you're talking about your own marriage because that's
Mhm.
perspective that kids whose parents aren't divorced don't have. But I think society's changing. I think people in general are thinking more about whether they should be married or not and who they should be married to.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's a great thing. Like, you should be thinking about it. Like,
Of
it is
course.
the biggest decision you will make in your life, who you
Of
choose to spend
course.
your life with.
Of course.
So you shouldn't take it
Yeah,
lightly.
it's a
But
huge
yeah.
decision, which again can work both ways. And then sometimes people overthink it too. Like, is
Yeah.
this not the person? Like, at the end of the day, you really never know. Like, no
Right.
one knows if their marriage is going to work out amazing and they live happily ever after. And no one knows if like things are going to go south. But I mean, eventually, if you love someone and you think you want to spend the rest of your life with them and you picture them as like the spouse of, the father or mother of your children, I mean, you got to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We close every episode with this one question, and it is, what is the best piece of dating or relationship advice you have ever received or have to give?
I'll go back to the same thing. Communication. If you cannot communicate openly, whether through the good, through the bad, through the mundane, through every day, once communication breaks down, big trouble is going to happen. So it may be awkward, it may be uncomfortable. You have to communicate with your partner. If you don't communicate and you lose that, it just exacerbates problems. It creates issues that shouldn't have been issues. The cracks spread and things will not be good. And, you know, again, a simple like week of not communicating can turn into a month, a year, 5 years, a decade. And all you could have done from the beginning is say, hey, let's figure this out. Let's talk through it. If we need help with someone else to help us talk through it, let's do that. But if you stop communicating, I think you're in big trouble.
Yeah. The conversations you are afraid to have are usually the most important ones you need to be having.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
This was great.
Where can people find you if they need to retain your services? Where can they do that?
Well, hopefully you don't have to find me, but if you
Hopefully not.
you do. Our main offices are in Chicago, in the Chicago suburbs. We have offices in Michigan and the Detroit metro area. You can find me at Merel Family Law. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, Jonathan Merel. If you need me, I'm here. Feel free to reach out, message me, email me. There is light at the end of the tunnel if you are going down this road, and we're here to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so great.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks for having me.